Welcome to the Flex Rental Solutions webinar. Today we're going to be looking at contacts in Flex. We're going to be looking at some best practices and how you can set up your contacts and some of the useful features that we have that are related to your contacts in your Flex system. So before we start with getting into some of those features, let's just provide a quick overview of contacts in your Flex system. Obviously, you can see that your contacts are separated into by default, six different contact resource types. If you need to add more of these contact resource type folders, so for example, I've seen some of our customers that want to create a new folder that's called artists, like musical artists or something like that. You can certainly create more by going to the System Settings menu, clicking Resource Types, and here you can see all your different resource types, whether they be contact related, inventory related, or anything else. We're just going to focus on our contact related resource types. You could double click on any of these to see some of the settings, and you'll notice that most of the settings that you're going to see, let me try that again, are just going to be blank or not used. That's because most of the settings for these resource types are not applicable to contact resource types. Really all you need for a contact resource type is a name, a plural name, availability mode. A lot of times you hardly even need there because you're not necessarily using these contacts in availability. There's some more advanced features you might use if you're using labor and staffing. You might want to choose an availability mode. But a lot of times you could just choose either permanent or labor or staffing, and then the applicable resource class is going to be contacts. So if you want to create a new folder for your contacts, a new resource type folder I should say, we'll click Create New Resource Type, and let's just use that example that we used earlier. So we'll say artist, the plural being artists. Again, I don't necessarily have to choose an availability mode, or at least a specific one, but let's just choose labor or staffing for this. And then the applicable resource class will be contacts. That just means it's going to show up in this contacts section here. Click Save, and then if I click this little refresh icon here, we can see that I now have my new resource type folder here. And then I can also drag and drop that. Let's say I'm moving it above clients, and it now appears above clients. Sticking with some of the very basics about this, we want to talk about how you can create new contacts in your system. Again, we'll just gloss over this really quick. It might be useful for some of you that might be brand new to the system. To create a new contact or a new company, you can go to the Contacts menu and click either of those options. Also, if you want a quick way to do it, you could just right-click on any of the resource type folders, and that will give you the option to create a new contact or a new company. A best practice that I always like to share with people, again, and this is just a best practice, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right or wrong way to do it, but a lot of times you might have several different contacts at one company. And so people ask, when you're creating a new company, do you provide a name, a first and last name for that company? Or do you just create the company and then create the contact for that company as a separate entry? I tend to gravitate towards creating a separate contact entry, even if you only have one contact at that company. To me, it just helps it keep a little bit more organized, and maybe down the road, if you get more contacts at that company, then you already have it split out, and all you have to do is just create a new contact for that company instead of having to remove the name from the original company, then creating a new contact for that person, then creating a new contact for the new person, etc. So just as a best practice, I usually like to create just a company as a contact. Doesn't necessarily have a name associated with it, except just the company name. and then I would go to create a new contact and associate them with the company that I've already created. One thing you'll also notice is that if you do it this way, you have the opportunity to inherit the shipping address and other information from the parent company to the new contact that you're creating. Right now, I don't think I had anything set up on this Chase credit card company, so let's choose another one. And it will also let you extend the trading terms that are associated with this company. You could say yes or no if you want this contact to inherit the trading terms. For now, let's just say no because we're going to change the company. I think I do have some shipping address information set up with this RMDB company. So I'll click what I want this contact to inherit and click accept. And if I need to, I can fine tune, maybe say his extension is 2, maybe add their mobile phone if you have that information. Typically, though, the address will probably just be inheriting the company's address because you're not putting this person's personal home address there. And same with email, you might put their own personal email. I don't know if that's a real company or not, but we'll just go with it. The other thing you'll notice in the resource type, again, this is the folder that this contact is going to belong to. It automatically selected client because RMDB Incorporated is a client. So when I added this as this contact's company, it automatically selected client so that it will appear in the client folder here. Of course, I could change that. I could say maybe he's a vendor. I could also say that they're both a client and a vendor. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You'll see that I have some contact types set up here. A lot of you might not see this in your new contact window, and that's fine. We'll go over this a little bit later in the webinar, how you can set up different contact types. Really, all contact types are a way that you can add, I guess, different attributes about contacts so that you can apply them to your different contacts and make it easier to search for those contacts when you're using your contact manager. Again, we won't apply any of that now. We'll go over that a little bit later in the webinar. I'm going to click accept to create this new contact. And what you'll notice is that you have not only the information that you already added, but there's some more information that I can now add to this contact. Most notably, we have personal details that we can add down here. If I click add field, you'll see a bunch of different options that you can add that are personal details about this particular client. One that I think is particularly useful is the birthday field. You can choose this person's birthday, and then there's a specific report in Flex that's called your contact birthday report. So if I add this contact's birthday as October 30th, 1980, and then I go to my reports menu and click contact's birthday and ask it to print any contact that has a birthday in the next 30 days, then it would show this contact and anybody else in my system who has a birthday in the next 30 days. So a really great way to have a birthday list if you want to send out birthday cards to your different customers and clients. You can also add other things like anniversary, favorite restaurants, and things like that if you ever want to give them a gift card or take them out to dinner. So some useful stuff there. You can also add new phone numbers. You can add new and different addresses. So for example, they inherited the shipping address of the company. I could also add a mailing address, even a home address. And I could edit any of the information that's on here just by hovering over and clicking on it. Once you see that green sort of highlight, then that's when you know that you can edit something. Another thing that you'll notice on this page is the relationships widget that we have here. This automatically created a relationship between this contact and this company, because when we set up this company, we said that he is an employee of that company. Another way to look at this is if we open, and we don't even have to open the contact, we could just click the arrow here next to RMDB, and it automatically created this new test contact as an employee of the company. And you can also see the other employees that we had set up previously. You'll also notice there are some different types of relationships we could set up as well. So for example, in this RMDB Incorporated, I said, and in this case I said that I am an event planner for that company. If you want to add any new relationships, so let's open this RMDB. I'm going to click New Relationship. And let's say that I want to add somebody that is a booking agent for this company. I can find the contact. I can either type their name in here, or I could click the binoculars to search. But let's say we're adding Chris as the booking agent for RMDB Incorporated. So now if I refresh this here, go back and look at RMDB Incorporated, we now have a new relationship for booking agents, and you can see who the booking agent is for that company. So this just makes things a lot easier when you're looking for a specific person, or I should say somebody that holds a specific role in that company. Maybe you don't know who that specific person is off the top of your head, but you've entered that information previously, so now you can come in and say, I'm looking for the booking agent, and find out exactly who that is. This is especially useful when you're setting up a venue. So you set up a venue much like we just set up a new contact. Usually I will set up a new venue as a company. There isn't necessarily a wrong way to do that. You could set it up as a contact as you want, but to me, I would set it up as a company because I might not necessarily want to associate the first and last name of a person with just a venue. And you'll see why as I look at this venue that I previously created called Abravanel Hall. What I've done is created a bunch of relationships for Abravanel Hall, like the front of house engineer, production manager, musicians, lighting programmers, florist, etc. And so to me, I like to look at it as you create a venue as a company. It doesn't necessarily have a specific name associated with it, but then you would set up additional contacts that are associated with that company or venue, and then you can call them whatever you want, whatever type of relationship they have to that venue. So let's say that I wanted to add, I believe we have a relationship for monitor engineer. So I could choose the type monitor engineer. And let's just use Chris Stein again. So now we have a monitor engineer, and we can see that it is Chris Stein. And if we click on Chris's contact as well, you can see it creates a relationship for everything I've set him up as a relationship to. So he is the lighting programmer for Abravanel Hall. He's also the monitor engineer for Abravanel Hall. And he's a booking agent for RMDB Incorporated. We do have a webinar on contact relationship types if you want to learn about how you can set those up. You can create more of them. If you have very specific relationship types that you want to associate to a company or to a venue, then you can certainly do that. We're not going to cover too much on how you create the new ones here. We just wanted to give you an overview of how you can use this and how it can be useful to you as you're setting up your different clients and contacts. Let's look at a few other of the tabs that we have in a contact entry. So we'll go back to our original test contact that we set up. And let's look at the term/notes. There's a few things on here that I wouldn't use necessarily for a client, but I might use for maybe one of my employees. For example, the security section, I'm not necessarily going to use for somebody that's my client. But for an employee, let's open my contact record, for example. What you'll see here is that in the security section, I'm associating my Flex user ID with my contact entry. And what I mean by that is each person that has access to Flex, of course, has a user ID set up in this user section. And so in the security section, I would just come in here, start typing my name so that it would find my user record. I can also say if I have multiple locations, what is my home base? I've chosen Salt Lake City. And I can also choose which locations are enabled for me to view. So maybe I never want to be able to see San Francisco or Denver locations because I never deal with those locations. I only want to see Salt Lake City. I would just uncheck those other locations. And I can also have a default corporate identity. What all these defaults are going to do, when I go to create a new quote now, the account manager automatically fills in with my contact entry because I'm logged in as myself and my user ID is associated with my contact entry. And also my warehouse is automatically going to fill in as my home base location. I currently don't have the corporate identity enabled for quotes right now, but if I did, and if I had it as user default, then it would default to whatever corporate identity is my default corporate identity. So that's what a lot of that security section will do. It just kind of helps you as you're creating quotes and doing things in the system, it will help to default to the certain things that you have set up. We also have the skills and qualifications that comes in handy when you are doing labor booking in your system. So again, we won't go too much into this. We have a separate webinar video about skills and qualifications and how you can use labor booking in your system. But for now, we'll just show that you can assign a skill and qualification to each contact in your system, whether it be employees or maybe even your freelance labor. And if you want to add more skills and qualifications, just go to the System Settings menu and click Skills and Qualifications. So you would just choose one, give them a rating, then click plus to add. Again, go on our YouTube page and find more videos about skills and qualifications and also about the staffing assistant, and you can learn more about how this is useful. Now, a few things that you might use for a client. So if we go back to our test contact, you might use default trading terms. If you have multiple currencies, you could say which currency does this contact always use. You could give them a standard discount, so every time you use this contact on a quote, that it will automatically apply this discount. Same with terms. It will automatically apply these terms to a quote when I use this person as the client or customer on a quote. And you can apply a standard tax rate if you know they live in a certain county or state where you have to use a certain tax rate. And you can apply a default pricing model that is always used with this contact. You can also add insurance coverage information. You'll enter a carrier, what the coverage limit is, and when that expires. And there's ways that you can get that to apply to a quote so that if the total replacement cost of all the gear on a quote is more than their insurance, then that will give you a warning. Again, there's a lot of setup for that. We're not going to go into it now, but we have a video about that on our YouTube page as well. You can also add additional notes about this contact, and as a reference point, have some standard bill rates. For example, if you're using employees or freelance labor, you can have a reference here as to what they charge for their services. So maybe we open my contact and say that my standard day rate is going to be $400 or $500 or something like that. Let's go through some of these other tabs really quick. We'll go back to our test contact. We have a correspondence log. So anytime you talk to this contact, you can make a record of it. And then you can also do a follow-up. So say they call in and you don't have the information that they need. So you can say, I will follow up with them by Thursday via phone. Oh, I need a description there. And what's going to happen now is because I assign this to myself, this is also going to show up in my to-do list. So when I log into my Flex system and go to the to-do list, I can see any pending correspondence logs that I have. Documents in the image gallery, they're pretty straightforward. You can just browse and upload certain documents or images associated with this contact. So you might have an employee contract or just their photo or something like that. The utilization has to do with if you're using this person in staffing and labor in your system. So for example, if I am assigned to any job and I go to the utilization tab, then it would show any of the jobs that I'm assigned to. Looks like I'm not assigned to anything right now, but we could probably see a couple jobs I've been assigned to in the past. The Job Notes tab will pop up, and this one is, again, useful for maybe your own contact entry or for your employee contact entries. But if I have any quote that I've entered notes on, and I'm the account manager, then those notes will appear here in this Job Notes tab. And so if you're the account manager for maybe 20 to 30 jobs that are happening in the next 3 months, and anybody that's entered a job note to that job. And what I mean by that is when you have a quote open and you go to the job notes or the notes tab over here and add any note. Again, if I'm the if I'm the account manager for this job and there's a job note on the job, then it's going to show up in my Job Notes tab. Oh, and you can see that I actually have quite a few. So this is pretty useful. If you just open your contact entry, go to the Job Notes tab, it gives you an overview of all of the notes that are in the different jobs you're the account manager for. You can also look at a payment history. Again, this is probably more useful for your clients. And for the most part, when you create a new contact, that's about where it's going to end. You can see that I have a custom tab that I've set up. This one we set up for a customer that said, I want a tag that says, should we quote this person, yes or no? What if somebody calls in and we've put a hold on their account or something? You can open their account, look at the internal info and say, do not quote yes. Oh, I'm not going to make a quote for them because I've tagged them as a do not quote. You can add these custom fields. They're here on the System Settings menu. If you click on Custom Fields, then click New Custom Field, you would just apply this to the resource type or the resource class of contacts. And again, we have a good video on our YouTube page about how to set these up. But just as that quick overview, you can set up additional tabs that have your own information on here. A lot of companies will set up custom tabs like this that have, and it looks like I deleted mine, but I recently set one up that had like Sky Miles numbers, different travel numbers and things like that. So if there's one person in your company that books all the travel, they can easily reference all of the different rewards programs that contact is associated with. So again, find that on our YouTube page, a nice video about how to add more custom fields. One thing that you'll notice as well, this test contact has no more tabs. But when I open other contacts, you might notice that they have new tabs for invoices, manifests, pull sheets, quotes, etc. Anytime this contact is used on any of these elements, it's going to create this new tab in their contact entry, and then you can reference any time that they have been the client or the customer for a certain quote, pull sheet, invoice, etc. So don't be discouraged if you don't see these in all of your contact entries. Once you start using them on quotes or invoices or pull sheets, or if you've received payments from them, those tabs will appear. And so those are most of the tabs that you have with the contact entry. Of course, if you need to delete one, you could just use the delete contact over here. You can also click the audit trail to see when it was modified, created, and who did that. So if you're missing information on a contact, you can come in here and see who modified it last. I also want to briefly look at our contact manager. This is on the contacts menu. And this is where you can either just search for all and it will pull up all the contacts in your system, or you can search for a specific contact and it just gives you a really nice view of all of their information, so you don't have to open each and every contact entry. On this page, like on most of these list type pages in Flex, you can choose your preferences and choose what actually shows on this page. So maybe you don't want fax because none of your contacts use a fax anymore. So I can make that disappear. And this is per user. So a user can change their preferences and it's only going to change for them. It's not going to change for every user in the system. And after you've made some preferences, you can save your preferences by clicking on this icon. Choose what you want to save. I usually just save everything. Then click Save Preferences. The very last thing we want to look at is these contact types. Remember, as I was creating a new contact, you saw these contact types as an available option. Again, we're not going to look entirely at how to set these up. That would be an entire webinar in itself. In fact, we do have a video on our YouTube page that you can view if you want to get specific about how to set up these contact types. But after you've set them up, you can see that you can assign each contact to any of these different contact types. So I've set up contact type groups that are called city, region, and then just type. The type is going to be, are they an audio or video vendor? And you could set up any number of these types. This person's not a vendor, so I'm not going to do anything there, but let's look at my vendors. Aaron Kopp, for example. I know that he's in the Salt Lake City area. He's an audio vendor. Audio vendor. And then I could even say region. I just have some pretty general regions. He's in the Americas. And what this does is now when I open my contact manager, and I might have had an earlier preference where I had those not showing. But when you open your contact manager now, it will show you those along the header, and you can use the drop-down menu to choose, I only want to view contacts that are in the city region of Salt Lake City, or the general region of the Americas. And it just helps you, if you don't have a specific contact in mind, it kind of helps you to narrow down, I just need any audio vendor that's in the Salt Lake City area, and it will list each of those audio vendors in the city that you've chosen. And so that's what contact types and contact type groups are. If you want to learn more about setting these up, they're pretty straightforward, but if you do need some more information about that, check out our YouTube page again, and there's a great video on how you can set up contact types. Looking at just a couple of the reports that you have from the reports menu that are related to contacts, you can do a complete contact export, which means it will just export every contact in your system with all of their information. You can also do a contact schedule if you're using any contacts in labor booking in your system. We already looked at the contact's birthday, and then also the contacts by date. And this will just show you any contact that you created between a certain date range. So if I just only wanted to view contacts I've created in the past 2 months, I would choose that date range and then generate the report. So those are just some of the best practices that we wanted to share in terms of contacts. Just as a quick review, you can set up new contact resource type folders if you need more than the default 6. And that's just done in your system settings and resource types. Create a new resource type. We also talked about, as a best practice, just creating a general company record and then adding individual contacts for each employee that's associated with that company. We also looked at each of the different tabs that are in a contact record and what you can do with those. And then finally, we looked at these contact types. And if you want to set up more of those contact types, you could just look at the contacts menu, go to contact types, and then set those up here. If you have any of your own best practices that you would like to share, we definitely encourage you to go to our forum. You can either click on the webinars board and find the topic for this specific webinar and share some of your ideas or questions that you have specific to this webinar. We also have several other boards that you can click on if you just want to share some general best practices or ask questions and get best practices from other Flex users. If you have more specific questions that are technical in nature or something that you feel only a Flex representative could answer for you, then we ask that you email support@flexrentalsolutions.com.